So what we want to do, hopefully all of you have been through the grad school orientation, which they've moved online. If you haven't done that, be sure to do that. It's pretty well done. There's several modules, and it's a good overview to general grad school policies and the campus and being a GA and things like that. And so please, I would encourage you to do that. But what we're going to focus on today is sort of what's unique to being here in the Department of Environmental Science and Technology. And we're going to move along pretty quick because there's probably another class scheduled to come in here at 10 till 1. And so we're going to try to get through there, hopefully still leave some time for questions. If you got something that you think is really confusing and you want to interrupt me, go ahead. All right. And if I didn't introduce myself, I'm Dr. Ravenhorst, and I'm the Director of Graduate Studies. And I have been since the department formed 12 years ago, and I can't get anybody to take my place yet. So we'll see how that goes. All right, so let's jump in here. I can figure out how to advance this. There we go. All right, so most of this information is in the newly revised graduate handbook, which just went up online last week. So if you looked at an old version, there's a number of dead links. Several of you have pointed out some of those problems. We tried to address all of those and get it as up to date as possible. Although, of course, since I posted it in the last week, I found one or two other things that I want to revise. So it's a living document, but you can always go back here. If you suffer from insomnia, it's probably, just get a copy next to your bed at night and it'll help you get through with that. So here's where we are. We're down here in the Animal Sciences building. That's where most of our department is. And then the other half of the department or so is up in H.J. Patterson Hall. You got to know where those are. Hopefully you've gotten oriented. If you like pictures instead of detailed maps, there's the Google image, right? So hopefully most of you are getting pretty familiar with at least those parts of the campus, and with time you'll become more familiar with all of the campus, of course. First thing I want to say is that we're committed to diversity, equity, inclusion, and respect. This is certainly, it's a campus initiative, but the department has taken this by the reins and actually been a leader in the college in terms of developing these things. This is also in process. We want it to be a welcoming environment, regardless of how you understand yourself, and we appreciate the variety of folks that are in our department, and our goal is to increase that diversity. If you have questions about what we're doing, or you want to be involved in the process, I'd suggest reach out to Dr. Lansing, who's chairing this effort in our department. And yeah, so that's sort of our starting point. These are key people. Hopefully you know some of these, probably you've met others. Hopefully most of you have met Dr. Bowerman, who's our chair. As of today, you've met me. Tina Seitz is a really important person. She's the administrative aide. She's sort of the graduate coordinator. If anybody needs like permission to get into a class or keys or things like that, we'll touch on those, but she's the go-to person in the department, especially for graduate issues. Alex Bondar sort of runs the IT support. He's a busy guy. He has some helpers working with him, but he's responsible for that. If you haven't visited the Project Development Center, or what some of us just call the shop, it's a pretty impressive place. One of the great things about this department is they can make all kinds of interesting instrumentation, field equipment, and Les runs that. He also is responsible in his group for getting packages that are delivered down there, distributed to all your offices and labs. And then Rosalind Pinkard is the Director of Administrative Services. She's got some folks working with her up there, or at least she will in the next week or so. We've had some change in personnel, but she sort of oversees all the business, HR, budgets, and stuff like that. So, this is sort of an important one. And how do I get rid of this thing? Something up here? Hide floating meeting controls. Good. This is why you got to collaborate with someone under 40, right? So this is sort of the bottom line I like to start. Who's responsible for making sure that you complete the grad school requirements and all the deadlines and all of that stuff. And I say that's your responsibility as a graduate student, but hopefully with help of your advisor and your advisory committee. They're there to help you through the process, but you're in graduate school, so don't expect someone's gonna hold your hand on every little thing. And so you make sure you be aware that when there's a lot of important deadlines at various parts of your program, and you should be aware of what those are and make sure you don't miss them. I'm sure your advisor will be working to try to help you do that. But we haven't had many like Dr. Gallo come in who actually have been through this process. So they're sort of learning, but they didn't have the benefit of a formal orientation yet, but we're going to try to fix that. Okay. So your advisor and your committee are key. Hopefully everybody knows who your advisor is. We only admit people into our program when they're signed to an advisor. We don't let people come in and float and wander around. Getting your advisory committee is also very important. They should be involved in both developing your plan of study, which is what classes you're going to take over the course of your program, and also input regarding the research that you're doing. Now, fundamentally, that's primarily something that works out between you and your advisor, but we depend a lot on committees, and the committees are there to be of service to you, to give you some additional input, to make sure your advisor's not over the top in terms of what they're asking you to do or expecting you to do, or some other people to kind of help encourage you along the way, get questions answered or whatever. So this is why we encourage you to get your committee formed as soon as possible, but by no later than the end of the first year, because they're also supposed to have input into developing your plan of study, and that also has to be submitted by the end of the first year. And if you can do some of these things sooner, all the better. So it says they're appointed by the advisor, but really that's a conversation with you when they figure out, if you take a class or two, or you get their input about who else has expertise. You also want to make sure, especially like for doctoral committees, that this committee, they're going to be your advisory committee. They're also going to be your examining committee. And so the doctoral requirements require that you have someone from outside ENST. And so it's good to sort of plan as you're getting your advisory committee together to keep in mind if there's any grad school requirements for that. And then you got to meet with your committee at least once a year. We recommend meeting more often with your committee, but at a minimum once a year. That's one of the official benchmarks, meeting with your committee once a year. And then they help you to develop this plan of study, which are the courses you take. There's certain things that everybody in the department takes, minimum amount, which we call the ENST core. And then depending on which of the 4 specializations you're in, there are certain requirements. Those are more detailed and spelled out at the master's level. We expect students at the doctoral level to have met the master's level requirements. And then there's a few additional requirements, but those are, where there's flexibility, those are going to be sorted out between you and your advisor and your committee, right? So the committee has to sign off on this. And it's important because once the committee signs off on this, then you have to submit a copy of it as you're completing this benchmark. It goes to Tina Seitz, and she's going to enter that into this computer program called UAchieve, which sort of monitors the courses that you're taking. And so that becomes your official requirements then to complete your degree from a course standpoint. And it can be changed, but anything that gets changed has to be done and approved by the committee as a whole. So for example, here's the ENST form, right? There's a place to fill out the courses that you're going to take in your program, when you're going to plan to take them, although the when you plan is not as important as what they are. Once they're done, and they have all your committee signatures, this gets submitted to Tina Seitz. She enters it into the computer. And then you, as a student, as well as any your advisor or myself, can log in and see where you are and what progress you've made and what courses you have yet to take. And this is especially critical for master's students because there's much more critical requirements from the grad school in terms of master's courses requirements. But you have to get audited with a positive outcome before you actually graduate. And what that means, this goes in, and so you're taking classes, and when you get, towards the end of your program, you're ready. We do this audit, and if there's anything you have that was originally entered and it's not completed, you don't move forward. And so what happens commonly, it's not at all unusual that during the course of your program, you were planning to take course X, and you find out, oh, and here's course Y, this is a better course. Your committee agrees, they all agree, substitute this for that. But if it hasn't shown up with all the committee signatures to Tina sites, it hasn't been changed and you achieve, and we're still expecting that you're going to take the other one. And or you're planning to take a course and it's not offered. It's only offered every other year, you missed it, and so you're going to substitute as long, the committee's got on board, but you got to get the signatures, get it to Tina. So otherwise, those last few weeks when you're trying to graduate is going to be crazy. You run around trying to get signatures from committee members and all that stuff. So doing it in advance. And I tell this to people every year, and I remind people every year, and you can guess what happens every year. There's people who get caught and they forget. So don't be that person. All right, the proposal, fundamentally, this should have input from your advisor and your committee. Your committee has to sign off on your plan of study. We don't have a formal proposal defense. It's not that, but your committee does need to sign off on it, right? So you think you got it worked out with you and your advisor, but your committee, we got to have all your committee signatures. And this is one of the requirements, especially for doctoral students, in order to be advanced to candidacy. Okay, so you got to complete your course, you got to have your comprehensive exams, you got to have your proposal approved in order to be advanced to candidacy. But even for master's students, this is still part of your benchmarks to have your committee sign off on your proposal, meaning they read it, they think it's reasonable, it's good science, and it's doable within the time frame that you're expecting. So this also helps protect you. This makes sure that your advisor, maybe they're just overly optimistic and think you can do 14 experiments between now and the end of your program, and when it's maybe really only feasible to do 11, right? So anyway, your committee can step in and say, don't do that. That's too much. They've done enough. Let's move on. Also with this, you'll notice that there's anything that's related to human subjects, animal subjects, radiation, even chemicals or boats. There's special training that's all managed by the Department of Environmental Safety. And so you have to get approved on that. We'll talk a little bit more about that, but keep that in mind as you're thinking about what kind of research you're going to be involved in. Now, the grad seminar and poster symposium. So we're meeting here today on Wednesday at noon, because Wednesday at noon is supposed to be blocked out by everyone in the department, so that all the faculty and all the grad students can tune in here. And we've been a little flexible, since COVID came in. We set this up so we've got a hybrid arrangement. If for some reason you can't be here in person, you can still connect in through Zoom. That's an option. But regardless of whether you're signed up officially for the ENST 7898 class, we expect everybody to be here. It's the one thing we do as a department together every week. And so build it into your schedule, encourage your fellow graduate students to make a priority of it. Gently encourage your advisor to do it. But it's an important thing. Now, also at the end of the semester, which we usually do the day after the last day of classes or reading day, is we have a departmental poster symposium, which includes posters from some students that are in the class and other students that have created posters for conferences or other things. We usually do it out here in the atrium. We usually provide high quality fizzy malt beverages, and we make it a fun time. And so that's an important thing. But part of it is also some of the requirements. Now, every student, one of your, part of the ENST core is that whether you're in a master's program or in a PhD program, you have to take ENST 798 twice, 2 different semesters for 1 credit. And During the first time you take it, you're expected to give an entrance presentation, which usually is because, and then the other one is an exit presentation. Okay, so one of those is supposed to be an oral presentation. One is supposed to be a poster. Usually we encourage that your proposal type things are done as a poster, and those are included part of the poster symposium at the end of the semester. And then usually the exit presentation is a formal presentation. It's a full hour, or we do it in this 50-minute period. And that's expected to be at the end of your program and summary of what you've done in your research. And next week at Wednesday at noon, we'll have our orientation introduction for some of you who may be enrolled in that. And then our very first presentation will be the following Wednesday, the 14th. We have a number of guest presentations. So some of these are student presentations, a number of them are guest presentations. And so they're good, they're useful, and everybody engages and participates. All right, annual reports. Every year, last day of class in the spring, it's usually like May 12th, 13th, 14th. You have to turn in an annual report. It's signed by you. It's signed by your advisor. It's 2-page. It's pretty short. It's mostly check off the box. Have you met this benchmark? Have you met that benchmark? Did you meet with your committee? Who was present? Has your proposal been approved? Has your plan of study been signed off on? Have those been filed? And then there's an interesting little box where it says, has the student made satisfactory progress during the previous year? And your advisor is going to check yes or no, and they're going to sign it, and then you're going to sign it. And of course, if they say no, we say, tell us a little bit more about it. I'm sure in your case, always be a positive plus yes box. But the important thing is just helps us to keep track and help you to keep track of the benchmarks that you're supposed to be completing at various points along the way. I think I put these in here. This is a list. This is published. We include a copy of this with the annual report form, which you can download as a Word document. You can look at them now online if you want to see what they are. These are available under forms. But you'll see, for master's students, you got to obviously meet with your advisor. Hopefully, you've all done that. And then form and meet with your advisory committee at a minimum of once a year. So by the end of the first year, you should check off. They're going to say who's on your committee, who was there, and you check off who was there. Have you completed your plan of study? Has that been signed off by, there's a form for that gets submitted. So you plan that you should be doing that. They ask about the entrance seminar. Has that been done? Which should be done by the end of the first year if you're a master's student. Your coursework, mostly we expect should be done mostly by the end of the third semester, because this is ideally a 2-year program. And then your proposal, you might have your proposal signed off earlier than that, but certainly by the end of the first year if you're a master's student. And then there's these other things, and your annual report you see is part of the benchmarks. So at the end of the first year, the end of the second year, end of every year that you're here, we need an annual report. And then for doctoral programs, it's pretty similar. But we add in here, of course, there's in addition to the proposal, there's a comprehensive exam, which has to be done towards, after you've completed most of your coursework. That's described in more detail in the grad handbook. But otherwise, so this is what we're just looking for. So the annual report has a chance to say, remind your advisor, remind us, how you're doing. If you miss benchmarks, you'll probably get a letter from me that says, why did you miss this benchmark and what are you going to do to fix it? And, my first letter is not usually too scary. But, if we don't get some progress, I've practiced at how to try to be scary. So I can try to get folks moving. But I'm not always very good at it. But. Okay, let's see if we can move on. Okay. Work expectations associated with the GA. Most of you are as GAs. If you're on a GA, this is a university policy, which basically says that your advisor can ask you to spend up to 20 hours a week on things unrelated to your master's or thesis or dissertation work. Okay. So that gets worked out differently in every lab, every professor. A lot of times, faculty just want you mainly working on your research. Grad school, as you hopefully understand, isn't a 40-hour-a-week enterprise. It's a time in your life where you need to expect to put in some extra hours. But we do believe in work-life balance. We want you to have fun. We want this to be an engaging, growing experience. But that said, so you're on assistantship, you get your tuition remission, your health benefits, and a stipend, and you'll be working on your research and your courses, but your advisor may ask you to help out with some other things. And the university says they can require up to 20 hours a week on the other things. So just be aware of that. What that looks like can vary from lab to lab. Some labs, during the year, it's pretty flexible. During the summer, they say, okay, you're going to work, 3 weeks helping your fellow grad student over here harvest the crops that are coming in, or they're doing this planning. And so there may be times when the whole lab pulls together to kind of work on one project or another project, and maybe most of the rest of the year it's not. So it's not, every week, it's 20 hours a week exactly, more or less. There's flexibility. If you think somehow that you're being taken advantage of, talk to somebody about it, right? This is not intended to exploit anybody. This is really intended to kind of, this will help you get engaged and help you be involved with other people's work. And if you have any questions, again, good insomnia curious to go read the grad school policies webpage. Time away from duties. So you're on a stipend, and people say, well, isn't this just like a job? You got a contract. It's not quite like that. And the legal people tell me that it's different. But you are expected to be able to have up to 10 work days away from duties every year. And this doesn't include, times when the university's closed. Right, your advisor can't say, well, you can take your time during Christmas and New Year's when the university's closed. It's up to you. I mean, this is sort of like leave, right? And that you don't, you need to inform your advisor about, but you don't want to leave things high and dry. You don't want to walk away in the middle of an experiment. You should let them know what's going on. But you deserve this. And it's not related to other kinds of things like illness or maternity, paternity benefits, adoption issues, things like that, which there are other policies which allow you to have time away as needed for those things. But it's not like leave that you can accumulate and transfer to somebody else or demand to get paid for at the end if you don't take it and that kind of stuff. If you're ill, the idea is hopefully these, short-term illnesses, they come up, we cover for one another. If something's going on in your lab, someone will step in. If you're helping with, teaching here at the someone else can cover that. The idea is we cover for one. It's all collegially supported. But if it extends, something long-term, and of course, illnesses have been a big issue in the last, couple of years. And but if it extends for longer than a 2-week period, then there needs to be some more of a formal review with your PI. The bottom line is, your assistantship is there because it's expecting you to deliver on certain research outputs. Sometimes the university is legally obligated to deliver outputs on grants and things like that. So it's not, there needs to be dialogue here. Our goal is to support you as you support us in this, but just be aware that if there's sort of something more longer term, don't ignore it. Don't pretend. You got to address it directly. All right. Okay, teaching obligations. So we think that teaching is important. It's part of what we expect people to learn and be involved in their graduate program. Therefore, all ENST graduate students are expected to teach during the program, but a little, not a lot. That's our sort of philosophy here. So If you're supported on a GA, it means that during one semester of your program while you're on a GA, that the teaching would be the equivalent of like 2 lab sessions or 2 discussion sections, and our expectation is that it would be less than 20 hours a week. So this sort of falls under this 20 hours a week that the university says we can ask students to do things unrelated to their research, okay? So the semester that you're doing that, let's say you're helping with Introduction to Environmental Health, ENST 233, if you're involved, leading some discussion sections on that, and that's taken most of that 20 hours a week, your advisor shouldn't be also asking you to do another 20 hours a week on other stuff that semester, right? That's not related to your dissertation or thesis. If you're not supported on a GA, and most people are, but if you're not supported on a GA, we drop the requirement to 1 discussion section or lab, and we will compensate you for that financially. Actually comes back to your advisor, who's will work around to probably compensate you for that. But if they bring in, but our general expectation is on a GA, it's 2 lab sections or discussions, otherwise just 1. And sometimes students in our program get teaching assistantships in other departments. Sometimes they might teach a course in micro or in biology or environmental science and policy. And if they do that, that covers their teaching requirement, right? So it doesn't matter sort of where you do your formal teaching, but as much as that you do some. And then occasionally we have people that work on like administrative assistantships, and they would also fall into this 1 discussion section, 1 lab kind of a arrangement. Okay, in most cases, if you're a GA, it works out so you do both of those on the same course in the same semester, and then it's done. Occasionally, student will do, one semester and 1 the next semester, 1 discussion section, splits up a little bit. When and where you teach is officially decided by these folks, the academic program personnel, the director of undergrad and grad studies, which right now is Dr. Leesnam and myself. Usually we coordinate with Dr. Bowerman. We always involve the student and the advisor in the discussion before it's finalized, right? So, generally speaking, we try to recognize, that students are going to do a better job if it's an area that they're, have more familiarity with. Really, and there's only certain courses that we really generate your reuse teaching support much for. There's like 3 courses that all the undergraduates in the program take. And but I think mostly it's in environmental science 233, Intro to Environmental Health, and Intro to Soil Science. And so usually we try to use folks with soil science expertise to help with the soil science labs. The Introduction to Environmental Health is pretty general. We think that probably any graduate student can kind of step in there. Also, we generally don't assign this during the first semester that you're here. We want you to get your feet on the ground. And you can actually, I'm going to invite you to think about this and to provide input if you want as to when you do this. As I said, there's only a couple of classes that we do this for, but what we would ask is that if you think there's a certain semester you'd like to do it, or that you don't want to do it, let us know that. Let me know that. Write me a letter and run it. Make sure you've discussed this with your advisor. Okay, so this sort of comes with your advisor's sort of oversight. And but then we will do our best to try to accommodate that, but I can't make promises because there are 2 sides to this. There's always a supply and a demand side. And so occasionally, these are, but as I said, we hardly, I don't think we've ever asked anybody to do this the first semester. So part of this may depend on, when you're going to graduate, if you're going to, if we know we need someone in this class, we have a master's student who's going to graduate next semester, we need to use them. If you're a PhD student, we might bump you back a little bit further. So, but if there's some particular reason, let us know, right? So we can try to be accommodating. FERPA. Anybody that teaches needs to learn about FERPA privacy. So when the students' parents call up and ask about their, the helicopter parent swoops in, you need to just sort of be able to how to give the stiff arm, right? Okay, miscellaneous. So the immunizations. Okay, here's this crazy thing, right? So you may or may not remember that you're supposed to fill out some stuff about immunizations in order to start your graduate program. Does that ring any bells at all? If you didn't do it, they still let you register for this fall, and that's good. But if you don't do it between now and the spring, they won't let you register for the spring. Okay. So check to make sure your immunization records are up to date before too far along in the semester, so you can, get those records sent, or need to get an immunization or something. Take care of that before it's time to register for the spring semester, and your registration is blocked and you can't figure out what's going on. It happens occasionally. All right. Mutual expectations for GAs and supervisors. So this is it's a useful thing. It's become more and more formalized, but the idea is that every semester, you and if you're on a GA, you and your advisor are expected to have a conversation about these things. What your responsibilities are to GA. That is, what are they're expecting you to do, goals, deliverables, if any, and when and how they're supposed to be submitted. It may be formal, it may not. This is every lab, every advisor, every situation is a little different, and that's why we have this conversation, so that you're aware, because otherwise we bring expectations, and we want to make sure that we talk through them so that we've got the same expectations. Similarly, what are the responsibilities of the supervisor? How will you get the ongoing guidance and advice and things that you need? When are they available to meet? Do you expect to meet with them? When's work supposed to be performed? What are work hours? Do work hours mean anything? Regularly scheduled meetings, flexibility. What do you want you to do, or she wants you to do if you're sick? Probably call, or you gotta let them know. We've all learned how to do this because of COVID, even if we didn't know it before, right? Where things are supposed to be, where the lab workspaces, where you're supposed to do certain sorts of things, health issues, best practices, what they want in terms of, what training's available, what record keeping, how are, what goes on in your lab in terms of how are things handled. How are supplies ordered? Who's responsible for that? How do you let that know? Every lab's a little different. Professional individual development, skills, training, conferences, presentations, meetings. What do you expect? What do they expect? What, you need to talk about it and make sure you're on the same page. And then things like office space, workspace, dress codes. If there's going to be publication, how authorship, well, that's a big deal. That actually gets handled pretty well in a couple of our classes, but you need to talk about some of those things. And then some people have preferences about how they're addressed or how others address them. There's maybe a lot of things we sort of take for granted, but a graduate department also is a mix of cultures and background, people from a variety of places. And so we just want to make sure you're on the same page with your advisor and they're on the same page with you, so that we can avoid difficulties. And there's some folks who formalize this into a written document. There is a form that the grad school makes available where you can sort of fill in the box on various things. It's not required to be formalized in a written document. It is required to happen every semester. So I usually about middle of October, I start hassling all the faculty, saying, okay, documents, tell me, when you met with your GAs and had this conversation. And I record it, and I can pass that along up the line. That's my job as a director of graduate studies, to make sure that happens. Any questions about that? Hopefully, maybe you've already talked about some of those things. Some people, you'll find some advisors are much more formal, structured, others are more relaxed, informal, but you just want to make sure you don't miscommunicate. Okay, now a quick run through on what every ENST grad student should know. And how do you find out? How do you do these things, right? So desk. If you need a desk, talk to Tina. You know, there's a couple of grad offices down the hall here. There's a big grad office up in H.A. Patterson. I know there's vacancies, so if you need a desk, you can get one assigned. Campus mail. All right. Mail. All right. So you can get mail here. There's a mail room in this building. There's a mail room in H.A. Patterson Hall. It's a little simpler down here. Up in H.A. Patterson, so your mailing address for this is the room 1426 Animal Sciences. That's the mailing address down here. For up in H.A. Patterson, the mailing address is actually 1213 H.A. Patterson Hall, and that's the ME's office, which they're friends of ours, and they actually have administrative people there all day. Our department doesn't have any administrative people signed up in there, so they collect our mail and then it comes over and we sort it and get it worked out. All packages, okay, so it's not your office number, right? Don't use that as a mail delivery. Similarly, all packages come to this address, regardless of whether you're in H.A. Patterson or down here, ENST building 142.H. That's the shop. And Les and his people will collect the packages, sign off for them, and then get them to your office or your lab or wherever they need to be. Okay. So don't put your office, don't try to get UPS or Amazon to ship things to your office. Right? They come there. They know how to do it there. There's photocopier upstairs in the mail room. There's a photocopier. Is it working yet? Oh, they fixed it up in H.A. Patterson. So anyway, fewer and fewer people using photocopying, right? Probably half of you didn't do any photocopying in the last year. Maybe most of you didn't do any photocopying. You guys are all under 30, right? So they're all, let me just photocopy. Even I am learning to do everything as much as possible with PDFs and digital stuff. Purchasing supplies, get approval from talk to your advisor about it. Every lab's different. There are university Visa cards, but you probably won't get one. But your advisor probably has one. And so it's actually pretty easy to get things ordered on the Visa cards. Compared to like the federal bureaucracy, I think our state bureaucracy is not quite too bad. I talk to my federal colleagues and it makes me feel better about things here at Maryland. Travel related to work, likely you're going to have to travel either for your research or for meetings. We have, sometimes if you're going to use your personal vehicle and expect to get reimbursed for mileage, you got to get that approved in advance. Talk to your advisor. We do have departmental vehicles. If you need a departmental vehicle, some labs have their own vehicles. We also have a group of pooled vehicles down here that you can sign up for. And so those are available. If you're traveling out of state, like for a meeting or for field work or something, you've got to submit a travel approval before you leave. And then when you get back, it's all, you fill out your travel expense reports and get reimbursed. But that's all got to be approved in advance. Your advisor will have budget numbers and things to cover all of that. If you travel a lot, you can actually get permission and training to do the travel forms yourself. If you're only going to travel once a year to a conference, probably easier just to have Tina do it for you. So it depends on sort of how much traveling you're going to need. And I think I already said this about departmental vehicles. The university's got a big group of pooled vehicles that we can be rented, but we also have a group of pooled vehicles here in the department that are relatively free. Getting access to rooms, some rooms are on keys, some rooms are on swipe cards. Tina, again, handles all of that. If you need to get into a room, she needs the room number, the core number on the little lock core. I've long since given up trying to be able to read those, but I've discovered that if I take a photograph with my phone, I can zoom it up to actually see the number that's engraved on the core. And so anyway, she needs that detail. And if you're going in, if you're getting permission to somebody else's lab, then you also got to get permission from the PI to get access to that particular lab. And there may be training. If you're going into any labs, there's training associated with going into labs. It's all handled by this group, this thing called BioRaft on campus through environmental safety. To summarize about grad office space, you're gonna get access to a desk in an office either down here up in HCP. The only people that have access to those rooms, the swipe card access, are people with desks that have been assigned desks in there. And the policy is, if you don't have a desk in there, you need to convince the chair and I that you need to have access in there for some reason, because it's for security purposes. So the only people generally going in and out are people that have a desk in there. Okay. If there's an issue, facilities in the program in the building, you're walking down the hall and you notice water coming out under the door of Dr. Gallo's lab. What do you do? Well, I hope he's around soon. I haven't seen his grad students. Oh wow. No, you memorize this number 52222. It's easy to memorize. It's a shorthand. If you're calling on your cell, you got to dial 301-405-2222. That's facilities management. You can report anything, emergencies. I called them a few times last week when I had water coming through my wall in my office during the big rainfall event about 2.5 weeks ago. If the power's out, you walk in and there's no air conditioning. Anything like that. You know, you go into and your hood is beeping and the airflow isn't working properly in your hood. You call them. If there's a big issue, like there's a flood or potential damage, you also let Gary Seibel or Les Lawrence know about it, because they like to handle it sort of from the department side to kind of work with facilities folks. But what's the number? All right. Lab safety. We're big on lab safety. Every university, big university, is big on lab safety these days. It's all handled through the Department of ESSR. And in order to get into a lab and for you to get access to your lab, you're supposed to complete certain online training. I think that these 4 units: chemical hygiene, lab exposure controls, hazardous waste generator, new lab research training. You got to get all those done. Most of them you do once. Hazardous waste generator, we do every year. I just redid mine 2 days ago. Okay. And your record is all going to be in this BioRaft. Your advisor will assign you as a member of the lab in BioRaft, and then it shows who's there. You can click on there and see what training you have to do, you know, when it needs to be renewed. He can glance, or she can glance at that and see, you know, whether you're up to date. And if anybody that's teaching, there's a special module for teaching assistant training. Okay. What else? Yeah, individual labs have different requirements. So sometimes you need some special training to work within a particular lab. So if you're moving into work in somebody else's lab, that's why the PA needs to approve that. You might need some special training. I already said if you need permissions or a stamp, used to call it a stamp, just permission. Tina Sites, she's the go-to person. If you need something on the website, Jonathan Stefanoff is great. He works half-time for us and half-time for animal sciences. His office is like right over there, but he helps. He's our webmaster, and so if you need any information, you see an issue or something that you think is an error, he'd love to know that. If you're having trouble, we hope our goal for you is to succeed, that this is a happy experience, that you get the kind of support, collegial relationships that you're expecting and that you want, that's going to help you in your career. But periodically, you know, issues come up and people are struggling with one thing or another. And so I would say this is sort of the order. First line is to talk to your advisor, unless your advisor is part of the issue. talk to your fellow graduate students. You know, there's a lot of wisdom. A lot of these folks have navigated these things. They can be some help and encouragement. You can certainly talk to me, or you can talk to the department chair, Bill Bowerman. Both of us have open door policies, and we're willing to talk with you about things. And then I say, as sort of a last resort, there's also the grad ombuds officer, but you know, all of us are interested in mostly in you succeeding. And the ombuds officer is also interested in that, but they're also interested in the university. And so, you know, so we would encourage you to, yeah, they're available if you like that's what you need. And then there's also a very good counseling center on campus that you can reach out to directly over in, I think, in Shoemaker Hall. Parking is weird. Talk to your fellow graduate students. Usually you can, you know, parking costs, you wouldn't believe how much I have to pay to park every year. You know, every time they built a new parking garage, my parking fees went up about $300. So I'm sure I pay over $1,000 a year. So I don't know what grad student parking rates are. They still seem very high to you. They're probably too high, but there's a lot of people ride. There's good shuttle bus arrangement. A lot of people walk and bicycle. But if you need to park, some of these lots nearby you can park after hours. If you try to park during the day, they're going to nail you. But what those particular requirements are sort of are in flux and they change. And so read the signs, check with your fellow grad students. Tina is also sort of our contact parking person. If you have questions about your paycheck, Rosalind Pinkert, she's in charge of the whole business office in there, and she can work with you. All right, so that used most of our time, but any questions? I'd be happy to try to answer any questions briefly here, or if this has stimulated things you want to talk more about, you want to stop by and give me a buzz and do Zoom or something, I'd be happy to talk with you more about. Any things that I sort of didn't address, or some of you veterans, or the things that you'd like to, I'm sure you got great wisdom that maybe you would be willing to share, or you can also do that in the next hour, right? Which is any outstanding, yeah, Josh.
I was curious what the big changes, or if there are any big changes in the grad student handbook.
They're not radical changes, no. We added the DER page. You know, we tried to update and correct all the links so the links work. People change, so we made sure that the names were associated with crime. I mean, most of it was that kind of stuff. You know, I added the section on mutual expectations, so that sort of come in since the last edition. But I don't think it was radical. Anything else? Yeah.
In regards to lab safety, if students are accessing, is that for only wet labs or any of those lab spaces down at the ground floor, like a GIS lab and things like that?
Yeah, I don't know that there are any. I think they're primarily wet labs. I honestly don't know that. I don't think there's like a computer lab, which obviously the GIS is just a spiffy version of the computer lab, and I don't think there's no safety training for that. Okay. Okay, well, thanks for coming. If questions come to mind, reach out to your fellow students, reach out to me. Yes.
One last announcement, just for everyone afterwards, there's a pizza lunch, just wanted to put that out there. The Gates going to be hosting.
Who's hosting?
Gates.
Gates.
Yeah.
Gates. Hopefully you all know about Gates, right?
Not for the orientation.
Why not? It should be. I should have there should Gates. I bet there is Gates in the handbook.
I think it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Gates is our graduate student organization. So they do a great job. There's lots of, who are the officers this year? Jordan, Danielle, Katie, and Bradley. Great.
If you're not on the email list, contact us and we can get you on there. You have social events and stuff. It's fun.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks very much. And for those of you that are in seminar. We'll see you next Wednesday for the orientation. Dr. Will not do that. And then hopefully we'll see everybody in 2 weeks for the first seminar.